My name is Sarah. I'm 29 years old, and for 3 years I was trapped in a relationship with a narcissist who betrayed me in the cruelest way. He cheated on me, and then made me believe it was my fault. His lies poisoned everything I was, until I couldn't tell the difference between truth and manipulation. It started with small cracks I tried to ignore, nights when he didn't answer my calls, messages left unread with no explanation. I'd ask where he'd been, and he'd sigh, roll his eyes, and say, "Why do you always need to control me? Can't you just trust me?" If I questioned anything, he accused me of being jealous, insecure, needy. Soon, I stopped asking questions at all, because every answer left me feeling like I was the problem. The gaslighting was relentless. When I found a lipstick stain on his shirt, he laughed and said it was mine. When I saw late-night texts from another woman, he told me I was imagining things, that maybe I had dreamt it. Once, I caught him coming home at 3 a.m. reeking of perfume. He looked me straight in the eyes and said, "If you weren't so cold, maybe I wouldn't need to go anywhere else." I started doubting myself, wondering if maybe I really had pushed him away. The abuse escalated until it consumed me. He blamed me for everything. His anger, his lies, his betrayal. When I cried, he sneered, "You're pathetic. That's why I can't stand being around you." When I begged him to stop cheating, he spat back, "If you were enough, I wouldn't need anyone else." On my birthday, he disappeared for hours. When he finally came home, I asked where he had been. He smirked and said, "With someone who actually appreciates me." Those words shattered me more than the infidelity itself. And yet, I stayed. I stayed because he convinced me no one else would love me. I stayed because I was ashamed to tell anyone the truth, that the man I loved was betraying me, and somehow, I was blaming myself. I stayed because leaving felt like walking into emptiness, and he made me believe that emptiness would be worse than his cruelty. Now, when I look back, I realize he never loved me. He only loved control. He cheated. He lied. And then he twisted the knife deeper by making me believe I caused it. He broke my trust, my confidence, my spirit. But there is one thing he couldn't take away. The small part of me that still whispers, "I deserve better than this." He cheated and blamed me, and for too long I believed him. But I don't want to believe him anymore. The betrayal didn't just break my heart. It broke my sense of reality. I used to think cheating was something clear, something undeniable. But with him, even betrayal became blurred, twisted, painted as my fault. I remember one night in particular. I saw a notification light up on his phone while he was in the shower. My hands shook as I opened the message. It was from another woman, calling him baby, asking when she could see him again. My chest felt like it was splitting open. When I confronted him, he didn't apologize. He didn't even deny it. He just smirked and said, "Why were you snooping? If you trusted me, we wouldn't have problems." Suddenly, the issue wasn't that he had betrayed me. The issue was that I had looked. And somehow I ended up apologizing. That became the cycle. Every time I caught him, he turned it around until I was the guilty one. If I cried, he said, "See? You're unstable. No wonder I need to escape." If I demanded honesty, he said, "You drive me to lie with your constant suspicion." His betrayals weren't just acts of infidelity. They were weapons he used to make me doubt my worth. The humiliation was unbearable. Once, during a dinner with friends, he flirted openly with the waitress. When I confronted him later, humiliated and hurt, he laughed in my face. "She was just being polite," he said. "You're imagining things. You're so desperate for attention, it's pathetic." I began to wonder if maybe I really was overreacting, if maybe my jealousy was the real problem. But deep down, the truth clawed at me. I could feel it in the way he avoided eye contact, the way he guarded his phone like a secret diary, the way he came home smelling of perfume that wasn't mine. Every sign screamed betrayal, and yet his words drowned out my instincts. "You're crazy. You're the reason I do this. You're not enough." And so I stayed. Not because I believed I deserved betrayal, but because I believed I couldn't survive without him. He convinced me that nobody else would want me, that I was lucky he hadn't left me for good. Sometimes, I even begged him to stay after his affairs, terrified of being abandoned completely. Looking back, that was the deepest wound of all. Not just that he cheated, but that he made me beg for scraps of his presence while he gave the best of himself to someone else. The nights I spent waiting for him were the longest, sitting on the couch, staring at the clock, praying he would come home. When he finally did, he would act annoyed, as if I were the problem for worrying. "God, you're suffocating," he'd say. "No wonder I need space." And just like that, the blame shifted again, and I was left in silence, drowning in shame. There was a business trip he claimed he had to take. 3 days out of town, meetings, late dinners, long hours. I wanted to believe him, but my gut told me something was wrong. On the second night, he didn't answer any of my calls. I barely slept, pacing the floor, trying not to imagine him with someone else. The next morning, he finally texted, "Stop being so obsessive. I'm working. This is why I can't stand being around you." But weeks later, I saw the proof. A friend of a friend posted a photo on social media. There he was, smiling at a bar, arm around another woman. When I showed him, shaking, he didn't flinch. He looked me straight in the eyes and said, "She's just a colleague. You're paranoid. Honestly, Sarah, I think you want to believe I'm cheating because you need drama in your life." His calmness was terrifying. He lied so easily that I doubted the evidence right in front of me. Another time, he ruined our anniversary. I had prepared a quiet dinner at home, candles, his favorite food, trying to remind us of what we once were. He never showed up. Hours later, he stumbled in, reeking of alcohol and perfume. When I asked where he'd been, he smirked and said, "If you weren't so boring, I wouldn't need to go out." I sat at the table alone, the food cold, the candles burned out, wondering how I had become a woman begging for the bare minimum. The betrayal wasn't only in his affairs. It was in the way he made me question my reality. One night, I confronted him again after finding flirtatious messages. He exploded. He shouted so loudly that I backed into the corner of the room. "You drive me to this," he screamed. "You make me cheat because you're never enough." His rage terrified me, but his words cut deeper. Somehow I believed him. Somehow I thought maybe my flaws had pushed him away. Isolation made it worse. He said my friends were bad influences, that they filled my head with lies. He told me my family didn't understand relationships, that they would judge me if they knew the truth. Slowly, I stopped talking to anyone. I stopped seeking comfort, stopped asking for help. My world shrank until it was only him and his betrayals. And still, I stayed. I stayed because he convinced me I was the reason he cheated. I stayed because he twisted every betrayal into proof of my failure. I stayed because I thought maybe, if I changed enough, if I became perfect, he would finally stop. But perfection was never enough. Nothing ever was. I started to measure time in lies. The hours he didn't answer. The minutes between the blue ticks and his excuses. The seconds before he turned everything back on me. My body kept score in ways I couldn't hide. Headaches that pulsed like sirens, nails bit into the skin, a constant ache in my chest that felt like I was carrying a stone inside my ribs. I told myself I was strong enough to handle it, but the truth was simpler and uglier. I was afraid to be without him, even when with him meant bleeding a little every day. He developed a routine that looked like remorse, but wasn't. After each betrayal, there was a performance. Flowers from a gas station, a tired, "I'm sorry you feel that way," a promise that sounded like change, but worked like a leash. He'd be attentive for 72 hours, texting good morning, bringing coffee, touching my shoulder like I was precious. Then the distance returned, and with it the contempt. I learned the pattern so well that even his tenderness felt like a countdown. Once, I asked for his passcode, not to spy, just to quiet the hurricane in my head. He laughed and said, "If you were trustworthy, I wouldn't need privacy from you," as if fidelity were a gift I hadn't earned. Another time, he put his phone in my hand and told me to look, daring me to find anything. The message threads were clean, too clean. Later, I realized he used disappearing messages. When I confronted him, he yawned and said, "God, Sarah, you love drama," and walked away as if my pain was boring. He triangulated me with other women, subtle, surgical cuts. He'd mention a coworker's wit, another woman's ambition, a stranger's laugh that was so effortless. The comparisons weren't accidental. They were instructions. Be more, be less, be anything that isn't you. When I tried to match these moving targets, he shifted them again. "You're trying too hard," he'd say. "It's pathetic." Then he'd stay out late and blame me for why he didn't want to come home. I stopped telling my friends the truth because I was ashamed of repeating the same story. I found something, he denied it, I stayed. The few times I slipped and admitted I was hurting, he called it a betrayal. "You love making me look bad," he said. "No wonder people think you're crazy." After that, I curated my life. Carefully cropped photos, neutral captions, a smile that kept everyone from asking questions. I became the PR agent for my own captivity. The worst panic attack hit me in a grocery store. I was staring at 2 brands of pasta when my phone buzzed with his text. "You're suffocating me." My vision tunneled. The shelf tilted. I crouched beside the cart and pretended to tie my shoe while trying to breathe. A child asked his mother what was wrong with the lady. I wanted to say, "I'm being erased," but I just stood up, paid for nothing, and walked home, carrying only my keys and shame. He made me responsible for his cheating in a dozen different dialects. If you weren't so emotional, if you didn't nag, if you were better in bed. He weaponized intimacy like a switch, cold when I needed closeness, sudden warmth when he needed forgiveness. After one especially cruel argument, he disappeared for 2 days. When he returned, he kissed me gently and said, "See, you overreacted. I always come back." I realized then that coming back wasn't love, it was confidence. He believed I would keep the door open no matter what he dragged through it. I tried to bargain with reality. Maybe we could set rules. No more late-night work drinks, share locations for safety, weekly date nights to repair what he kept breaking. He agreed to everything and honored nothing. Agreements were just new arenas where he could prove I was unreasonable. When I reminded him of what he'd promised, he'd squint like he was trying to remember a dream and say, "You're making things up again." I started recording the promises in my notes app, not to trap him, but to convince myself I wasn't inventing the truth. There was a smear campaign I didn't see coming. He started telling mutual acquaintances that I was paranoid, that I had episodes, that I was obsessed with catching him, because I had nothing else going on. The first time a friend repeated one of his lines back to me, "Maybe you should work on your trust issues," I felt the ground tilt. He was prearranging the narrative for the day I finally broke. If I left, I'd be the hysterical one who couldn't keep a good man. If I stayed, I'd be the grateful one who learned her lesson. Either way, he won the story. But even in the dark, there were tiny rebellions. I started leaving my phone on Do Not Disturb when he decided to punish me with silence, refusing to dance when he snapped his fingers. I kept a small stash of cash in an old book he'd never open. I said no to things I knew would hurt me, even when saying no earned me an empty bed and a slammed door. These weren't exits, not yet. They were reminders. I still existed. The night everything sharpened, it wasn't dramatic. He was getting ready to work late. He sprayed cologne I hadn't smelled in months. He put on the shirt I once called his date shirt, and he smiled at himself in the mirror, a smile I hadn't seen directed at me in a long time. I asked calmly, "Are you seeing her?" He didn't look up. "You see what you want to see," he said, and something inside me clicked into place. Not rage, not even grief, just clarity. He needed me to doubt my eyes to keep his life easy. I didn't leave that night. I set the table. I ate alone. I washed the dishes one by one, feeling each plate become a decision I wasn't ready to make. But after the water stopped running, I did something small and enormous. I wrote a list titled, "Things I Know." He cheated. He blamed me. I am not crazy. I am not responsible for his choices. The list was short, but every sentence felt like oxygen. He came home late and tried to curl against me like he always did after he fed on someone else's attention. My body stayed rigid. He noticed and sighed theatrically. Here we go again. I said nothing. Silence, for once, belonged to me. I stared at the ceiling and pressed my tongue against the place in my mouth that hurt when I lied. I tasted truth instead. The next morning, I wore a dress he said made me look try hard, and lipstick he had called too loud. I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the woman, but not because she was smaller, because she was coming back into focus. On my way out, he said, "Trying to impress someone?" I answered, "Myself," and left before he could turn it into evidence. I wish I could say the voice in my head became a roar overnight. It didn't. It flickered. Some days it was a whisper under the avalanche of his certainty, but it existed. When he reached for his phone face down on the table, I didn't beg to see it. When he said, "You'd be nothing without me," I didn't argue. I wrote another line on my list. When he disappeared and reappeared with that infuriating calm, I noticed that my hands didn't shake as much as they used to. He still cheated. He still blamed me. He still told the world a story where I was unstable and he was generous. But now there was another story, one that only I could tell, one I kept in a notes app, and in the steadiness of my breath when I refused his script. I don't know what comes next. I only know that doubt is loosening its grip on my throat, and the stones I've been carrying feel a fraction lighter. He says, I'm the reason he breaks his promises. He says I create the problems I find. Maybe he needs that to be true. Maybe I needed it too, for a while, because it kept me from facing the simplest, scariest sentence on my list. None of this is love. And if it isn't love, then keeping it is not a duty. It's a slow disappearance. I'm not ready to vanish. Not today. I didn't tell him about the list. I kept it tucked behind a recipe in my notes app, disguised as measurements for a cake I never baked. When the anxiety rose like a tide, I opened it and traced the words with my thumb until my breathing slowed. He still tried to bait me into the old dance. Accusations, denials, the grand finale where I apologized for the crime of wanting honesty. Sometimes I slipped. Sometimes I spun with him until my head pounded. But now, after the storm, I had something to hold on to that wasn't his version of me. I made a doctor's appointment and told him it was routine. The nurse asked if I wanted an STI panel, and my mouth said yes before my shame could stop it. Sitting on the paper-covered table, I felt the split screen of my life, the part where I pretended I was overreacting, and the part where my body demanded answers. When the doctor asked if I felt safe, my throat locked. I nodded anyway. Later that night, I told him I'd gone for a checkup. He laughed, actually laughed, and said, "So dramatic. You're embarrassing." The laugh hurt less than the idea that I needed tests because the person who claimed to love me treated my body like a rumor. He started floating the word open like a solution. "Monogamy is outdated," he said, as if he'd discovered a philosophy rather than an alibi. "If you were evolved, this wouldn't bother you." It wasn't a conversation, it was a verdict. When I said I didn't want that, he shrugged. "Then stop asking questions you can't handle." I realized he didn't want openness. He wanted permission without responsibility. He wanted me to bless the very thing killing us so he could call it growth. There was a party for his coworker's promotion. He insisted I come, then spent the night orbiting other people, especially one woman in a red dress who laughed with her whole face. When I drifted toward them, he placed his hand on my waist and guided me to the bar like I was a piece of furniture blocking the view. "Don't cling," he whispered through his smile. "It's a bad look." Later, in the lift home, he said, "You made it weird tonight." I stared at the driver's headrest and memorized the stitched seams because it was safer than meeting his eyes. I began building a second life quietly, not a romance or a revenge arc, just a place to stand. I got a separate email, then a separate bank account with $10, then $50, then $200. I told a coworker I trusted that I wasn't okay and asked if I could use her address to receive a small package, new copies of my documents, a spare phone charger, a set of keys I might someday need. She pressed my hand and said yes, no questions. That hand on mine felt like the first warm thing in months. He noticed my edges getting less soft. "You're distant," he said one morning, like it was a failing. "I can't babysit your moods." I didn't defend myself. I poured coffee. He called that the silent treatment, a phrase he usually reserved for himself. I almost laughed at the inversion, but kept quiet, because arguing with a mirror never changed the reflection. When he left for work drinks, I opened my laptop and searched apartments. I didn't favorite anything. I just let my eyes learn the word available. The smear campaign matured. A friend pulled me aside and said she'd heard I was controlling and unstable. Her voice shook because she didn't want to believe it either. Something inside me unclenched. If the story was already circulating, I had less to lose by telling the truth. "He's cheating," I said. "He says it's my fault." She didn't try to fix it or interrogate me. She just said, "I'm here when you need me." For the first time, I considered that telling my story didn't make me disloyal. It made me real. He still used the same lines, but they landed differently. "You're exhausting," he said, when I didn't melt at his non-apology. "This is why I lie," he said when I asked for a plan. "No one will put up with you," he said the night he came home perfumed and smug. Each sentence tried to pin me to the old wall. My list answered back with short, stubborn lines. Things I know grew to things I will not do. I will not check his phone. I will not beg. I will not rewrite reality so he can sleep well. I started therapy on my lunch break, telling him I'd joined a work wellness initiative because the truth would become evidence against me. In those 50-minute islands, I practiced saying sentences without apologizing after them. He cheated. He blames me. I'm afraid. My therapist asked what I wanted. I stared at the ceiling tile and said, a quiet morning. Then, softer. A life where my body is not constantly bracing. She wrote something down and said, let's build toward that. Build, not fix. The word felt respectful. He tried love bombing again. Reservation at a restaurant he knew I liked. A sudden interest in my projects. A photo of our hands posted with a caption about us against the world. The comments flooded in. Couple goals. You two are perfect. He showed me the likes like he needed proof of our reality. I saw it for what it was. PR maintenance. A gloss coat on rot. After dinner, when he reached for me, I didn't pull away, and I didn't surrender. I was present enough to notice the emptiness. That emptiness was instructive. The results from the clinic arrived negative. I cried anyway, not from relief, but from the knowledge that I'd needed relief at all. I took the long way home and sat on a park bench watching a dog chase leaves. The dog didn't care who was watching, didn't check for permission to be joyful. It felt like a message addressed to no one, and somehow to me. One night, he came home early and found a small overnight bag by the door. Just a change of clothes and a toothbrush for therapy days when I didn't want to return immediately after our sessions. He lifted the bag by its strap like it was evidence. Running away? He asked. I said, not tonight. He smirked. You'll never do it. I heard the old fear rattle its chains. Then I heard something else. Boredom. Not with myself. Boredom with the script. We'd performed this scene so many times it had lost suspense. He needed my terror to make it art. I didn't feel like acting. He escalated with one last invention. I think you might be the one cheating, he said, almost gentle, as if offering me a place to put my guilt. Your energy is off. I blinked. The projection was so transparent it was almost elegant. I'm not, I said. I'm just done pretending. He scoffed. With what? I looked at him, really looked, and said, with the version of me you require. I expected fury. He shrugged, a little afraid of the flatness in my voice. I kept collecting proofs of a life beyond him that were so ordinary they felt radical. A spare toothbrush at my friend's apartment. A podcast I listened to on walks without pausing when he called. A calendar invite labeled meeting that was really an appointment to see a room with a narrow window and bad carpet, and a bolt lock that clicked confidently. I stood inside that ugly little room and imagined my breath filling it. It wasn't beautiful, but it was empty of him. The vacancy felt holy. He said, no one will want the mess you are. Maybe, maybe not. Wanting is no longer the measure. He said, you'll come crawling back. I don't know where I'm going yet, but I'm learning to walk forward without narrating my own weakness for him to reuse. He said, you made me cheat. I write the counterspell again, the one that fits in the space of a breath. His choices are not my fault. I rearranged the list last night, because it's bigger now. There's a new section. Things I'm allowed to have. A door that locks from the inside. A night of sleep without scanning for lies. Friends who hear me and still want to sit next to me. A body that isn't a battleground. A morning where the only buzzing phone is an alarm telling me I get another day. He hasn't noticed that I stopped asking where he's been. He thinks it's trust. It's not. It's the quiet before the hinge turns. I'm not making a grand exit or a speech. I'm packing the kind of things you can't see from across a room. Courage pressed flat between documents. A name on a lease application. The ability to stand inside a mirror and say, without shaking, I know what happened to me, and I know what I won't allow again. I didn't plan a grand goodbye. The hinge turned on an ordinary morning, the kind that used to swallow me whole. He was in the shower, steam fogging the mirror, humming like there was nothing to hide. I put my overnight bag on my shoulder, the one he mocked as dramatic, and placed my set of keys on the counter. No note, no speech. I'd spent years supplying explanations. I didn't owe him a last one. The door closed behind me with a sound I felt in my teeth. I half expected the hallway to collapse, for the ceiling to shout me back inside. Nothing happened. Just the quiet hum of the elevator, the soft weight of my breath. On the street, the city went on with its indifference. Dogs tugging leashes, a bus sighing, a woman laughing into her coffee lid. The world didn't end when I stopped orbiting him. The apartment I'd found was ugly in a comforting way. Narrow window, stubborn blinds, a stain on the carpet shaped like a continent no one would visit. I locked the bolt and stood there listening to the new silence. Not a punishment this time, not a threat, just the soft fact of my own company. I set my bag on the floor and took inventory. 2 shirts, a sweater, a toothbrush, the small envelope of cash, and my phone, buzzing itself breathless on the counter. The messages came in the usual sequence: confusion, charm, contempt. Where are you? Then, we can talk like adults. Then, you're making a scene. Then, you'll regret this. I watched the screen light up and dim, like it was trying to resuscitate an old version of me. I powered it down and put it in the freezer for an hour, an old trick I'd heard somewhere for cooling impulses. When the silence settled again, I realized I wasn't waiting for his next line. The play had ended. The audience had left. I didn't have to bow. I unpacked in slow motion, as if each folded shirt could split me open. I taped my list, things I know, inside the kitchen cabinet, where overpriced glasses might someday live. I read it out loud until the words stopped shaking. He cheated. He blamed me. I am not crazy. His choices are not my fault. The room didn't argue. The room believed me. I made pasta at midnight because I'd panicked once between 2 brands and left empty-handed. Tonight I chose one without ceremony. I ate from the pot, sitting on the floor, the taste ordinary and perfect. I took a shower and let the water run hot until my skin remembered it belonged to me. I slept on a naked mattress with a rolled-up hoodie as a pillow, and woke up before my alarm, surprised by how quiet a morning can feel when you're not bracing for the next revision of history. He called from different numbers the next day, all of them strangers to my phone, and no longer strangers to my nerves. I let them ring. He posted a photo with a caption about private struggles and people who can't handle real love. Friends sent screenshots like lifeboats. I said, I'm safe. It felt like smuggling light across a border. Grief still moved through me like weather. Sudden, unflattering, real. I missed the future I'd built around a man who was never inside it. I missed being the version of myself that hadn't learned these lessons in such sharp language. But missing is not the same as needing. Pain is not a leash, unless I hand it to someone. At dusk, I sat on the windowsill and watched the sky fade into the color of an old bruise. I tried on my name the way you try on a coat that used to be too tight. My name is Sarah. It landed clean. No echo, no footnote, no apology attached. He cheated and blamed me. I carried his blame until my shoulders forgot how to be mine. Today, I put it down. He can keep the story where I am the problem. I'll keep the life where I am not a prop. The lock clicks when I turn it. The list waits in the cabinet like a small, stubborn prayer. I don't know what tomorrow holds. I only know this. I will not be the alibi for someone else's betrayal. I choose the quiet morning, and when the old fear knocks, I'll answer with my name and close the door.